Good morning. It's time for us to begin. It's good to see everyone this morning. Great to have our mission teams back. We've got Don over here, Brother Boyd is back, and then all of the ones from Thailand are back. So welcome. I heard Furman and Jean went and had a Whataburger for their first meal. And Jean said it didn't take, and I don't know what that means. I said maybe you need a side of sticky rice with it to make it go down, but anyway. We are continuing our study in Christian evidences. If you notice, there is the email address for the office. Next week, we are going to take questions that you might have, and it could be some follow-up questions. It could be some new information. I'll give you one that was submitted that we'll be addressing, and that is water salinity. And I think that is a great question. The oceans obviously have a very salty, acidic salinity, and then you have fresh water. Well, if the water was covering the entire earth, how do we get that separation of salinity and the differences? It's a really good question. So we will take that up in earnest next week. If you have any questions, submit them to that office email. I would ask that those would be submitted by Wednesday to give us time to prepare, and then we will do our level best to address those next Sunday. This week we're going to look at a few things. I mentioned Mount St. Helens, and the reason that Mount St. Helens is such a great study is because you get to see geologic formations that occurred in real time. And we ended last week talking about how the hydrology studies of showing how sedimentation occurs together. Whenever there is a flood that occurs, you get rapid sedimentation and leveling that occurs, different layers. And so that happens both in a cataclysmic event of things that are thrown up into the air, as well as if it's pushed along, you're going to have that happen as well. And I don't think I mentioned that, and I'm not sure you can all see that, but in this here is from a 1989 science book from a Houston, Texas junior high. And that's a 1989 HBJ Earth Science, well-known publisher. And at that time, if there were a column of sediments deposited continuously since the formation of the Earth, the entire history of the planet could be reconstructed. But the point we made last week, and where this is good science, and that is, if I don't know the answer, say it. If you want to make a hypothesis, make it. But unfortunately, no such column exists. Now, that's a true statement, as we showed last week. So, where sediments are missing, a break in the sedimentary record occurs. So they call those unconformities. Well, there's a whole lot of unconformities in this earth. And so I wanted to start with that as we go into, looking at Mount St. Helens. Obviously, you have the fossil evidence out there. When you talk about a Cambrian explosion and everything like that, it's interesting to note that if you take these color jags here, these are all found throughout all these different layers. And if you look at an evolutionary theory, you would have a common ancestry at the very base, and then it eventually, over millions of years and eons, would branch out. And that's what you would find in the fossil layers. Well, that's not what we find. That is not what you find. You find all of these different ones created through those cataclysmic events and the layering and everything that would happen. And by the way, that doesn't mean, as we'll see with Mount St. Helens, that some of that couldn't have been created after the flood. You have a volcano eruption that occurs. You have a tsunami that occurs. You have things on this planet that occur. We were just talking about the hurricane and the fact that, how amazing it is to see the immense damage just that one storm could cause and create in Florida. So we have those things that are going to continue until this world ends, but it's interesting to study those because you're seeing a very small piece, a very small study of what a global cataclysmic event to that magnitude would look like. And so Mount St. Helens, and I call it geologic formations in real time, because you had people that were on the ground. Some people lost their lives. Some people were at, fortunately, a distance to where they were able to capture the scene of what was happening. But what was the aftermath of the I think it was 1980 event? And the first thing that you'll see in the aftermath of that event was there were 600 feet of sedimentary layers laid over a few days. 600 feet. Now, when you think about that from that one event, and then you think about a global cataclysmic flood and all of the fountains of the deep were bursting forth, then you can start to imagine and picture what the earth went through in that event. You would have these trees sinking in an upright position. So they were literally, the forestation was blown off of the mountains. And some of them found their way into a nearby lake, I think it's Rainier, that we'll look at in a moment. But that right there, that tree sinking in an upright position is a polystrate position, is what you'll see in just a moment. It created a 17-mile long canyon up to 140 foot deep. And we looked at the South Texas flood and what it created last week in a matter of 3 days of rain, 34 inches of rain. Rapidly forming petrified trees and other structures, but trees is what we are going to specifically focus on. Here you have an example. This was not from Mount St. Helens, but it's an example of a traversing fossil. It's a polystrate fossil, and what that means is it's going upwards through layers of sedimentation. And so obviously that means that that tree was in a position, and all of those sedimentary layers had to be laid very quickly over it, or else it would decay and break and not be there. And so these layers are supposed to date millions of years from top to bottom, yet it was laid down very rapidly by a catastrophic event. And there's a couple of words that some of the old Earth scientists like to use that I cannot use here about how frustrating it is for these type of things to be discovered. But they're real, and they have to accept them, and they have to work their hypothesis around those. Well, that's their problem. Okay, we're not gonna take their problem. But here is, and it was Spirit Lake. Spirit Lake just came to me. This is the scene in Spirit Lake, which is very close in proximity to Mount St. Helens. And you'll see trees at all kinds of angles here. You've got one on the right that's at an angle this way. You've got some that are laying vertically, some horizontally. And what happened is some of those, obviously, they get waterlogged and they sink. And when they sank to the bottom, the layers that occurred quickly covered them. And this is what you end up with. You know, if I came along 10,000 years later and I uncovered this, I would say, look, I've got a polystrate tree here. But it was formed in a very rapid formation because of Mount St. Helens and all of the ash and debris that was spewed from there. And so this here is a picture showing the layer that was laid in 1980. Now it's erupted again since then, and you got more, but just in 1980, this was from the red line to the top red line, bottom, lower red line to the top red line. That's how much was laid right there in this section. And so now you can't see, but that is obviously a mountain. What you have is the mountains here, and then that ash has layered itself up against it like this. So that's not another cap on top of it from a future event. This is from that particular event, and that's how it builds in there. And so if you put more water in there and you pressurize that, you would get a very quick hardening of that layer. And so there's a little bit of a difference between what a global flood event would look like and an eruption event only that occurred. They didn't have the water that remained on top of it and was pressuring it and everything of that nature. But it gives you a good idea of just how fast, when a cataclysmic event happens, just how fast these things can form. So I want to go back to Genesis and look at the new earth, because obviously we know that the earth was completely destroyed. Everything in it was destroyed. But I want to look at Genesis 8:1. Then God remembered Noah and every living thing. Well, what was every living thing? That would be that's on the ark. That's the only living thing that you have, except for what? Sea life, right? Fish. They didn't take fish into the ark. They didn't need to. And all the animals that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the water subsided. I always read right past that, but I find that interesting that God made a wind. Now, what kind of a wind did God make? It's obviously unique. It's obviously God using a naturalistic form of his creation, which is sun, wind, rain, right? You've got that being used to dry, assist in drying the earth. And I always looked at that and I just kind of read past that. Well, what would that air be like? What did that wind be like? And I immediately thought of Exodus 10, and the Lord turned a very strong west wind, which took the locust away and blew them into the Red Sea. There remained not one locust in all the territory of Egypt. How strong would a wind be to take every single locust and push it over into the Red Sea? How strong was that wind? And what would the residue be like if you piled all of those up? And then obviously they go into the Red Sea, and whatever the natural events that would occur beyond that are there. But I look at that verse and I think about wind passing over the earth, and that had to be something else to behold that we don't think a lot about. And then I thought about Exodus 14. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a mighty east wind all that night and made the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. It just ticked in my head that this is a very unique thing that is occurring. It's a miraculous event being done by God using wind to create evaporation and all of that goes with that. But I imagine it was a pretty howling wind that was going on during that time, and it says he did it over the entire earth. Genesis 8:22, bring out with you every living thing of all flesh that is with you, so that they may abound on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So Noah went out, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him, every animal, every creeping thing, every bird, and whatever creeps on the earth. And God decided to inspire the writer one last time to make the point, according to their families, just to make the point of how evolution is false from a macro evolutionary view. They were brought out of the ark according to their families, and they went out of the ark. Now, something else that we'll see in chapter 8 is the verse just prior to that, and the Lord smelled a soothing aroma from the altar that was put, and a sacrifice was made. The Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake, although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. So we see a lot of things here that have occurred at the aftermath of the flood, and God giving promises and God giving statements that are found in Scripture. And two things that we see here is that there will never be a flood to come upon the entire earth again. And of course, we see floods all the time. So either God lied or it was a global flood. That's your only two options. Okay? And I don't know if, Wendell, we talked about I think it was the Yuang River that overflowed and killed 1 million people back in I can't remember when it was, in the 1800s, I believe. 1 million people perished. So if God is true in his word and his promise, then it had to be a global flood. Had to be, right? And I think Wendell did an excellent job talking about that. Well, what's the other thing that happened? The other thing that happened is that God said, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake. Now, some people think that this earth is cursed. The ground is cursed today. Many do. Many in the Lord's church think that the earth, the ground, is cursed today. That is not so. That was ended in the flood. The earth was destroyed. The flood destroyed the entire earth. along with that, at the aftermath of the flood, God lifted that curse. Now, does that mean that there's no more thorns or thistles? Or no, it doesn't mean that. But if you read about a land filled with milk and honey, does that sound like a cursed ground? No, it doesn't sound like a cursed ground to me. And there's many passages about beautiful fields. The curse on the ground was lifted. The rest of the curses were not. And when you think back to when the initial curse was given to all mankind at the time that was living on earth, all mankind had that curse. Then you read the next chapter, the punishment that was doled out to Cain. And what did God say to Cain? Cursed are you, and the ground will not bring anything, will not yield anything. So God took the curse on the ground that was there, and he ramped it up against Cain and said, not only will you have to fight for your food to grow, you can't get it to grow anymore. Now, he was a farmer, so that was a pretty strict and punitive punishment for killing Abel. You ever think about that? So he had the curse already in place, but then he cursed Cain to a more severe degree than the curse. And I don't know how hard it was to bring forth crops. I don't know. I know it was hard. But Cain, it was impossible. That was another level. Well, after the flood, God says, I will never curse the ground again because of man. That curse was gone. It was lifted. I'm sorry, ladies, he did not lift the pain of childbirth. That one stuck. What was another thing that happened in this new earth? Part of this was the curse is gone. Okay, that curse on the ground is gone while the earth remains, seed time and harvest. You have seed time and harvest. Now, there's tilling that goes on, but the work of the ground that was done before the flood had to be very laborious, very high intensity based on just the fact of the curse. But after the flood, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest. Well, you drive around, we happen to live in a very agricultural state. Just drive out of town a little bit, and you'll see crops aplenty that are growing. And yeah, there's some weeds that'll come up in some of them, but there are some fields that very hardly anything. They don't even have to hardly treat them, and they grow fine. So is God still cursing the ground, but only in certain zip codes? I don't think so, right? I think that curse was gone, and that's what we read in verse 21. Cold and heat, winter and summer. All right, I just said wait. Someone told me, boy, it's really hot this year. I said, well, just wait. Just wait. It'll get cool, and it'll get cold. And yes, it was a dry period there, but it'll rain. Okay? As long as the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease. The promise of day and night being on the same equal level as winter and summer, of cold and heat, and seed time and harvest should give everyone great comfort and know that God is in control. So whenever things are pushing against humanity, just read Genesis 8:22. Print it out and put it up on your refrigerator if you need to, okay? I want to get my bumper sticker. I told you this before maybe. Worried about the whatever, Genesis 8:22, God says, chill out. Chapter 9. So God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth, and on every bird of the air, and on all that moves on the earth, and on all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hand. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you all things, even as the green herbs. So we have a number of things that occurred here again in this new earth. This is a new nature that's going on. Before the flood, we read in chapter 1 that the green plants, everything was vegetarian. Everything, mankind, the animals, they were all vegetarian. And here is a dramatic change that's occurred here. And as he had given that at the beginning, he is now giving the ability for carnivore. Okay? He's giving meat for mankind. And you'll also notice that he's giving a command there to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. That's the same command that was given at the very beginning to Adam and Eve, to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Now, how long do we see before we get to see a mass group of people would be at Babel, and we'll be able to judge just how much that multiplying looked like. But did they fill the earth? And the answer to that would be no, as we'll see in the story, right? When we get to the Tower of Babel, we'll see that they weren't filling the earth. They weren't doing what God had told them to do. And so there is a consequence to not doing what God told you to do. But the fear and the dread of mankind from the animals, the nature between us, is forever changed. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't domesticate, right? There's obviously thousands of domesticated breeds and different animals that can be domesticated, but does it begin in fear? I love some of those videos that you see on YouTube, where they find this dog, and the dog just looks horrible. I mean, just looks pathetic. And when they step out, the dog is just in total fear. And it barks at them, shows its teeth, and it's just as mean as it could be. And just in a matter of moments with some care and attention, it'll finally let you touch it. And then the next thing you know, that thing's in the car going all over you, right? But the fear was in there. That fear was in there. And mankind has control. That we still have dominion over this earth. That didn't change. We are told to have dominion over the animals in this earth. Well, what else changed? I think Brother Eric discussed this. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man, and as for you, be fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply in it. So again, he's repeating that command and that over and over, but he's also laying down a new law, a law of mankind. And that is that if you kill someone, not accidentally, but if you kill, like a Cain and Abel, you step out and you kill someone, you can be put to death. And God will totally allow it and be okay with it completely. And that is a command that he has laid down for mankind to administer. Whoever sheds man blood, by his blood shall be shed. By man. Very important. So also in this new earth, God said, this is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. It shall be when I bring a cloud over the earth that the rainbow shall be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. The waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. That's the bookend, that it was a global flood. That's your bookend statement from God. And the rainbow obviously could not occur before the flood. We talked about that, about the droplet size and the fact that there was no rain before the flood. But now there is. And so God, in his infinite wisdom and his mercy, gave us the rainbow. He gave us this rainbow. So, and don't we marvel when we see those? And every once in a while you see a double rainbow. I think I saw a triple rainbow one time. But it's just amazing. And if mankind's thoughts don't go to God when they see a rainbow, that's a shame. That's a shame. It's been hijacked. That beautiful symbol of promise from God has been hijacked. And that's something that I think is a concern. Genesis 9:18 and 19. Now the sons of Noah who went out from the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated. Now, does that ring a bell to another passage that we read before the flood? Does that not ring a bell with Eve? Now, her name was given Eve because she was the mother of all the living. Ham, Shem, and Japheth, from these the whole earth was populated. Everyone sitting in here this morning comes from either Ham, Shem, or Japheth. You're an offspring of one of those three, which means you're an offspring of Noah, which means that you're an offspring of Adam and Eve. That is the nature of God. And we will study that in 2 weeks. That'll be our last class, is talking about the origin of the ethnicities that we have in this world and the beautiful colorization of our pigmentation that we have. That's God-given, and it's something to be celebrated. Now we're going to take a hard turn. I wore my dinosaur tie this morning, got my T-Rex tie on, and so, you know, we see in news these events about dinosaurs being unearthed, and by the way, you know, what were they called before they were called dinosaurs? I don't know. I think we're going to get an inkling of that. But they were called dinosaurs now, and paleontologists discovered this 50-foot one in 2015, and they called it a dragon simply because that may have roamed the earth 160 million years ago. Well, there you go again. We found the dinosaur's huge vertebrae in the skull and the tail, so the locals began to say the long body looked just like a dragon from Chinese stories and obviously Chinese culture. The dragons that they have and everything that's embedded into that culture and the parades that they have, everything. So the bones resembled the shape of Chinese mythical dragons. And of course, in the square there, you have this picture that they have that has been rendered from ancient stories that have been passed forward of dragons, fire-breathing, dinosaur. Obviously, this is embedded in their culture. And you see that, and there's the parade that you see continue. And you have in museums these immaculate fossil records of these prehistoric-looking beasts, these huge animals. And then I start reading, and I went down the rabbit hole. You got to go down the rabbit hole if you start reading about ancient culture and everything. And so I went down the rabbit hole, and of course you have things that will never be able to be confirmed, such as Marco Polo. Marco Polo, he was an explorer, and he made a writing about seeing a great beast from Khan, the great Khan. In this province are found snakes and great serpents of such vast size as to strike fear into those who see them, and so hideous that the very account of them must excite the wonder of those to hear it. I will tell you how long and how big they are. The head is very big, the eyes are bigger than a great loaf of bread. The mouth is large enough to swallow a man whole and is garnished with great teeth. And in short, they are so fierce-looking and so hideously ugly that every man and beast must stand in fear and trembling of them. Is that a real account, or is that him taking some excess? I don't know the answer to that. But you have this writing of Alexander the Great in 330 BC. He brought back reports of seeing a great hissing dragon living in a cave, which people were worshiping as a god. One of Alexander the Great's lieutenants, I'm not going to try that one, stated that the Indian king Abysarus kept serpents that were 120 and 210 feet long. Subsequent Greek rulers are said to have brought dragons back alive from Ethiopia. Again, I can't prove that. I'm just saying it's embedded in culture from a long time ago. And when we'll get to the Table of Nations, where all the ethnicities, we can see and actually trace some of those ethnicities, what you will find is that these regions that are being spoken about are in the China realm. And so off we go. Obviously, this is one that really fascinated me. This was uncovered in Canada in a mine that they were digging in, and they found this wonderful-looking creature. And I think it's called a Nodius. Yeah. It still had its armor attached to it. It was broken about midway, and you see where it's flattening out back there. They had the other platelets of the skin that had petrified, and they laid them on it to show what the full animal would look like. But the head was intact up to just past its neck. and an incredible looking creature, obviously, and it kind of gets your mind into what the hard plating would look like on a dinosaur. Nebuchadnezzar, Jeremiah 51:34, this is the King James Version, says, "The king of Babylon hath devoured me, he hath crushed me, he hath made me an empty vessel, he hath swallowed me up like a dragon, he hath filled his belly with my delicate, he hath cast me out." Now, some of your versions, that word for dragon is translated monsters. Monsters. Well, what are they? They swallowed me up like a monster. What does that? What would do that? He has filled my, why the analogy? Where would that come from? What would be the thought process to get there? So we see in Job 40, we've come upon Behemoth. Behold, and this is God talking to Job, and I want you to pay particular attention to how proud God is with his creation. Behold, Behemoth. Now, if I tell one of you, behold this plant, would there be a plant there? Okay? Behold it. So is Job able to see Behemoth? Yes. Job has seen Behemoth. Behold, Behemoth, which I made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold, his strength in his loins and his power in the muscles of his belly. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar. The sinew of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs like bars of iron. He is the first of the works of God. You see the pride God has in this creature? Behold, the description, bronze and iron. For the mountains yield food for him wherever all the wild beasts play. Under the lotus plants he lies, in the shelters of the reeds and in the marsh. For his shade, the lotus trees cover him. The willows of the brook surround him. Behold, if the river is turbulent, he is not frightened. He is confident, though Jordan rushes against his mouth. Can one take him by his eyes or pierce his nose with a snare? The answer to that is obviously no. That's a rhetorical question from God. No, you can't do that. Now, I love watching Crocodile Hunter. Boy, they can get them by the nose. You can watch people harpoon an alligator. You could see them lasso. I saw someone lassoing a hippopotamus and went for a wild ride before it finally tired out about 3 miles later. So you could do all kinds of crazy things with those animals, but the description I'm seeing here, tubes of bronze, like iron, that is not anything that we have or see on this planet right now anymore. We don't have that. We don't see that. Job saw that. We don't see that. And I make that because in the margins of your Bible, most of you, if you have a Bible that has margins on the right-hand side, it'll say possibly a hippopotamus, possibly an alligator. And then you read this description and you say, does that sound like an alligator? His tail is like a cedar. You ever seen the cedars of Lebanon? What those look like? How big they were? You ever seen that? Tail like a cedar? Now think about a crocodile. How big is its tail? You ever seen a hippopotamus tail? Right? Not a tail like a cedar. And you got to give them a break, because when those translations were made, those translations, the majority of them were made before the first dinosaur was actually unearthed. Think about that. You're going along in the early 1800s. The first dinosaur has not been uncovered yet. Not till 1847. So you're going along, and you'd probably be looked at like you mentally have an issue if you walked around saying, you know, there used to be these huge creatures, amazing creatures. They were monsters. They could eat a person whole. They had armor plates, tubes of bronze. Their scales were knit together. No air could pass between them. People would think you're crazy. Who is this guy? Wouldn't they? until they uncovered the first dinosaur. And all of a sudden, oh yeah, there's dinosaurs, yeah, whoa boy. And then it just set it off, right? But God, we were told about these in the Bible. We should be the least surprised people by things that are discovered, buried in this planet. Least described. Let's look at Leviathan. Can you draw out Leviathan with a fish hook or press down his tongue with a cord? I've seen a lot. Take that alligator, right? They play with them. Put your hand up there and their mouths are open and you can push down and then cord it. Right? Can you do that with this? Let's read on. Can you put a rope in his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? I can an alligator. Will he make many pleas to you? Will he speak to you soft words? So he goes from being proud, God does, to mocking man. You think that you know everything. You think that your troubles are just surpassing. Well, be humbled, young man. Be humbled. Consider Leviathan. Will he make a covenant with you to take him for your servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird, or will you put him on a leash for your girls? Will traders bargain over him? Will they divide him up among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? Lay your hands on him. Remember the battle. You will not do it again. Behold, the hope of man is false. He is laid low, even at the sight of him. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Maybe there is something to that history. At the sight of him. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. Who then is he who can stand before me? Who has first given to me that I should repay him? Whatever is under the whole heaven is mine. Had Job seen Leviathan? Job had seen Leviathan. In fact, if you just go back to chapter 3, behold, let the night be barren, let no joyful cry enter it. Let those curse it who curse the day, who are ready to rouse up Leviathan. Hello. Yes, Job has seen it. Where else do we find that in Scripture? In Psalm 74:4. This is a fascinating verse to me. You broke the heads of Leviathan in pieces and gave him to be meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness. Whoa. When did that happen? What, is there an event where people would be fed? I'll let you study it. Psalm 104:26. There go the ships. There is Leviathan, who thou hast made to play therein. Some of your translations say to sport in. So obviously Leviathan in the sea, fearing nothing. Isaiah 27:1. In that day the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent. Now we're getting to a use of an image of Leviathan. I've seen Leviathan. I know Leviathan is this creature that I don't want anything to deal with. I know Leviathan is powerful, that it can destroy. I don't want to mess with Leviathan. And now in Isaiah, what do you get? You get Satan used. He's characterized as Leviathan. And of course, as we go through the Scripture, we find all the way to Revelation that he's referred to as that dragon, that serpent, right? All through Scripture. That characterization is given. Why? How would they picture what that would be like unless it was passed down of what there used to be on this earth? Behemoth, Leviathan. Job saw it. Job was inspired to capture God's inspired word on what they appeared like and what they meant. And then that characterization of assigning that to Satan, does that not make perfect sense? Can you not now picture in Revelation when you read about the great red dragon? Pretty interesting. He's not finished with Leviathan. I will not keep silent concerning his limbs or his mighty strength or his goodly frame. Who can strip off his outer garment? Who would come near him with the bridle? Who can open the doors of his face? Around his teeth is terror. His back is made of rows of shield, shut up closely as with a seal. One is so near to another, they are joined one to another. They clasp each other and cannot be separated. His sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. Out of his mouth go flaming torches. Sparks of fire leap forth. Oh, what came first? Brothers and sisters, what came first? The chicken or the egg? What came first? Ancient Chinese culture of dragons or the dragon itself? Which came first? God gave it, the answer. He told you what he did. He marveled at his creation. He was so proud of his creation. Out of his nostrils comes forth smoke as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals and flames come forth from his mouth. In his neck abides strength, and terror dances before him. The folds of his flesh stick together, firmly cast on him and immovable. God's not done. You're scared of that, but he's not done. His heart is hard as a stone, hard as the lower millstone. When he raises himself up, the mighty are afraid. At the crashing, they are beside themselves. Though the sword reaches him, it does not avail, nor the spear, the dart, the javelin. He counts iron as straw, and bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee for him. Sling stones are turned to stubble. Clubs are counted as stubble. He laughs at the rattle of javelins. His underparts are like sharp potsherds. He spreads himself like a threshing sledge on the mire. He makes the deep boil like a pot. He makes the sea like a pot of ointment. Behind him, he leaves a shining wake. One would think the deep to be white-haired. On earth, there is not his like, a creature without fear. He sees everything that is high. He is king over all the sons of pride. I don't want to run across that. And God is so proud of that creation. And he is summating everything that he has said to Job with these two beasts, these two creatures that he has made, that Job has seen. He is making his summation. That don't you be putting yourself and think, woe is me. Let me talk to you about how things are. Let me tell you about what my creation is and my control and my ability to create. We're going to end there. It's 10:13. I hope I've given you some things to think about. Next week, we're going to have the Q&A. So please, again, if I can go all the way back. Well, you know the office email. You can send it to me too, but the office email, send those questions. You can hand me a piece of paper with it written on, again, by Wednesday, please, and we will do our best to answer those next Sunday. Thank you.